1 year before the presidential election in 2020, two former heads of state of Côte d'Ivoire, Henri Konan Bédié and Laurent Gbagbo, meet in Brussels for the first time since the post-election crisis of 2010-2011. In meetings with Somaliland's leadership on 28th of July 2019, the United Nations Secretary General's Special Representative highlighted the importance of building on Somaliland's achievements as well as preparing for the country's upcoming elections. Prisoners decapitated and asphyxiated in city of Altamira in dispute linked to local drug trade and the gruesome gang battle that broke out in the Brazilian Amazon prison on Monday morning led to the death of at least 57 people. That's all for our top stories today. Stay tuned for more details in this newscast. The Gabonese Minister for Investment Promotion was off visiting investors in the Special Economic Zone at Nkok. These investors have been facing some administrative difficulties. He visited 3 processing plants and exchanged with some investors. Located 27 kilometers from Libreville, the capital, the Nkok Special Economic Zone is today the symbol of the diversification of the Gabonese economy. How the investors on the ground are working, the sector's chief manager went to reach out with his finger their daily realities. Trade, red tape, and the issues of product flow in the local market and in the sub-region were highlighted in 2 points. The area manager and investors are delighted with this visit, which will certainly bring many changes. The Gabon Special Economic Zone, which is now a reference within the area of the Economic Community of Central African States, is the most advanced project in the sub-region. The area offers advantages to businesses that settle there, namely 25 years of value-added tax exemption, 10 years of customs duty exemption, 10 years of corporate tax exemption, and 0% dividend tax. If the observers of the political environment are convinced that the meeting between Henri Konan Bédié and Laurent Gbagbo certainly predicts an electoral alliance, others, on the other hand, are concerned that there will be a remake of 2010, when in the second round of the election, Bédié, 85 years old today, abandoned his ally and supported Alassane Dramane Ouattara. Many argue that this alliance, even though it does not give rise to an electoral pact, shows that the opponents do not necessarily want a beautiful bride, but clearly the departure of Ouattara. The most skeptical speak of a failure of political generation because, according to them, to find themselves 10 years later with the same politicians with just a shift from one party to another does not bode anything good. But for Henri Konan Bédié, letting pessimism guide their action will not make Ouattara leave. In this interview, the leader of the Democratic Party of Côte d'Ivoire said he was confident for the future because the failure of 2010 is a lesson written in blood to prevent Côte d'Ivoire from slipping into a political entanglement again with people dying. Bédié and Koudou Gbagbo called on the authorities to carry out a profound reform of the Independent Electoral Commission, whose credibility will be the prerequisite for the consolidation of social peace in Côte d'Ivoire and for the organization of free and fair elections in 2020. This dynamic that set in motion to make Ouattara or his successor leave is perceived as a non-event by Kobna Kwasi Adjumani, spokesman for the Rally of Oufouettistes for Democracy and Peace. The latter maintains that Bédié has no more soldiers to fight. That's some clinical politics right there. In other words, between the will and feasibility, there are thousands of Ivorians to convince, who, according to him, have turned over the page Bédié and Gbagbo. Today, they say the Ivorians are united around a single idea, the reconciliation between children of the same homeland. A clean victory for RHDP in 2020 in the first round. This is what the powerful sees, but Koudou Gbagbo and Bédié seem to reply, it will not pass through us. Standing in the way against Ouattara, perhaps, since Gbagbo's return to Côte d'Ivoire is not completely resolved, as the latter is waiting in Belgium for a decision by the International Criminal Court. This meeting comes for the first time since 2010 and the post-election crisis that has caused more than 3,000 deaths after Gbagbo's refusal to admit his defeat against Ouattara. In Gabon, there will be no strike in the oil sector. The National Petroleum Employees Organization, whose strike notice was due to end this Sunday, has reversed its decision. The decision comes at the end of several days of negotiations between the Gabonese Minister of Oil, that of Labor, and the staff delegates of the oil company Adax Petroleum. An agreement that should in a few days lead to the holding of a restrictive assembly. Out of 8 main points contained in the specification, only a few await clarification from the government. As a reminder, the workers' organization of the oil sector demanded, among other requirements, the regularization of the socio-professional situation of workers between 2011 and 2018 and the granting of benefits to workers who have been promoted. In the RC, on one hand, there will be Moise Katumbi, who intends to make the Republican opposition a requirement. On the other hand, Martin Fayulu, who always claims the truth of the ballot boxes, and Jean-Pierre Bemba remains almost silent and undecided since the results of the last presidential elections in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Among other points of the Lumumbashi reunion, there will be discussion on the designation of Moses Katumbi's successor to the coordination of the opposition coalition Lamuka. According to many analysts, Jean-Pierre Bemba could be the one who will take over this coalition at the end of discussions. In addition to the issue related to the name of the future coordinator, Lamuka's future remains the ultimate challenge in view of many differences of opinion arising from the presidential election of 30th December 2018 won by Felix Tshisekedi. Isolated and always claiming his victory, Martin Fayulu will undoubtedly keep the same position, but one of these supporters, in this case Moise Katumbi, has already announced his position within the political class of the opposition. The only position still not clear and still misunderstood is that of Jean-Pierre Bemba, who has not yet uttered a single word. The meeting of Lumumbashi comes to clarify the positions of both, but above all to grant a new life and a new hope to Lamuka to make its comeback. The nation's top official in Somali highlighted the importance of building on Somaliland's achievements as well as make preparations for upcoming elections following meetings in Somaliland's leadership, which concluded on Sunday. UN envoy James Swan arrived in Hargeisa, his first visit to the semi-autonomous region of Somaliland since assuming his post in late June. He held discussions with officials including Somaliland President Musa Bihi Abdi and Minister of Finance Saad Ali Shir. UN envoy James Swan arrived in Hargeisa, his first visit to the semi-autonomous region of Somaliland since assuming his post in late June. He held discussions with officials including Somaliland President Musa Bihi Abdi and Minister of Finance Saad Ali Shir. During the two-day visit, Swan also sought to strengthen UN collaboration regarding humanitarian activities, economic development and capacity building for local governance and service delivery. Swan also pressed for the staging of elections in the region following the postponement of the vote, which had been set for March this year.
We also discussed the importance of completing the necessary preparatory work to proceed to credible parliamentary and local elections very soon. And in this context, I'm very pleased to have noted the agreement reached among political parties just yesterday to move forward in preparing for elections on an early timeline.
While in Hargeisa, Swan saw firsthand some of the work being carried out locally by the UN to help address humanitarian needs. While in Hargeisa, Swan saw firsthand some of the work being carried out locally by the UN to help address humanitarian needs and set out longer-term development goals. This included visiting livelihood projects backed by the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, in which participants were taught key skills in fields such as electrical work and clothes making.
It was inspirational to see the practical training being provided to equip refugees and asylum seekers to support themselves and their families, and also to contribute to the host economy and the community here in Somaliland.
In his various encounters, Swan reiterated the UN's commitment to supporting Somaliland and emphasized this during his meeting with local female leaders on Saturday, where he heard about the progress and challenges faced by women locally. At least 57 prisoners died during a clash between rival factions in prison in the Amazon state of Pará in northern Brazil. The superintendent of the penitentiary system of Pará has confirmed the deaths of prisoners from the Altamira Region Recovery Center, 16 of whom were beheaded. In addition to the death, several people were injured and 2 prisoner officers were once taken hostage in the clash last week. According to the press office, the confrontation began at 7 o'clock a.m., the breakfast hour, when members of a criminal organization invaded the complex where members of a rival faction were held. The prisoners then began a hard confrontation with artisanal weapons, locking the rooms, and set fire to the premises. The flames spread through the pavilion and caused death by suffocation. The military police, the civil police, and the paracourt rushed to the prison complex and managed to contain the situation as well as negotiated the release of the hostages, but the names of the dead or the criminal organizations involved were not yet identified. After the situation was controlled, those involved in the attack were transferred to individual cells and isolated from others. The Altamira Regional Recovery Center, located about 850 kilometers from the capital of Pará, has the capacity of 200 prisoners, but now houses 311 people. This is the second largest massacre in Brazilian prisons in 2019. This May, 55 were killed in less than 48 hours in 4 prisons in the city of Manaus, also in northern Brazil, an occasion that sparked an intense debate about prison conditions in the country. 1 year before the presidential election in 2020, 2 former heads of state of Côte d'Ivoire, Enrique Nambedier and Laurent Gbagbo, meet in Brussels for the first time since the post-election crisis of 2010-2011. In meetings with Somaliland's leadership on 28th of July 2019, the United Nations Secretary General's Special Representative highlighted the importance of building on Somaliland's achievements as well as preparing for the country's upcoming elections. Prisoners decapitated and asphyxiated in city of Altamira in dispute linked to local drug trade and the gruesome gang battle that broke out in the Brazilian Amazon prison on Monday morning led to the death of at least 57 people. That's the end of our newscast of the day, but keep watching G24 for further news.